Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fingal's Cave podcast. As we mentioned in a previous episode, we want to do some things differently this season. In addition to exciting guests and insightful conversations about outstanding Pink Floyd shows, we will also regularly have discussions about specific topics related to Pink Floyd. This time, we want to tackle a topic that is often fraught with emotions and talk about the Pink Floyd period after Roger Waters left the band, often called the later years. To help me out, I invited two Pink Floyd specialists last night to delve deeper into this era. My first guest was Martin, who has been active in the Pink Floyd community for many decades and has a great deal of knowledge of the specific Pink Floyd period. My second interviewee was Adam, a no less big Pink Floyd connoisseur and fan. He established a Pink Floyd website called echoes.com many years ago and is considered an absolute specialist among fans. So, with no further delay, we jump into the conversation and start with Martin, who briefly introduces himself. Here we go.
My name is Martin. I'm Belgian, living in Germany for the past 20-something years. Been a fan of Floyd since 88-ish, 89-ish, I would say. Get into the details later. Been a fan ever since. Started trading late. I'm an internet trader boy, not a sending discs back and forth. And I'm still sometimes more, sometimes less collecting and trying to find new stuff. Yeah, Adam.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Adam. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been a fan since the early 80s, since a little bit before the final cut. I was fortunate enough to start collecting CDs when they emerged on the market. I did have the luxury of doing old school tape trading, waiting for tapes to arrive in the mail and sending lists back and forth, and actually started trading across the internet even before the web was a thing. So very pleased to be here and quite honored, to be frank.
Great. So, Adam, what was your first encounter with Pink Floyd? At what age did you first meet them?
So I think I started hearing Pink Floyd on the radio when I started getting more into music and listening to the classic rock station here in Minneapolis and hearing things. And I started getting more serious about music and going and buying some tapes. And I remember getting Dark Side of the Moon. I remember when Works came out and bought that on tape. Thought there even then I noticed that there were some things, different on, that version of Brain Damage and Eclipse. Um, I had a friend whose older brother had an Animals tape, and I remember looking at that and going, well, this is weird. There's like 5 songs on here, and part of one song is on one side and part of one song is on the other side. And I think there were interesting things like that started getting me excited. But um, one of the things that truly got me interested in Pink Floyd, I think from a curiosity perspective, was starting to see some of the books. Like there was the Miles book, and I think one of the things that's forgotten about the Miles book is that there was a compendium called the Pink Floyd discography, and there were bootlegs listed in there. And so it was interesting to sort of go through and see weird albums like Obscured by Clouds and Atom Heart Mother, which I hadn't really known any friends that had them. And then all of a sudden you see all these bootlegs and you're like, what's Crackers and why are there so many songs? And 3 albums sounds like a lot of music. Um, Things like that got me really interested, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more. But some of the advent of CDs and working in a couple of record stores that really spurred me on.
Great. So I was about 4 years old when my parents had different vinyls playing. So I know, Martin, that we are sort of at the same age. But when did you first encounter with Pink Floyd?
So I had a female friend who had gone to the 89 tour opener in Belgium, Werchter, which is difficult for you guys to pronounce. And she gave me she lent me the Delicate Sound of Thunder, and that was my start. That was how it when a whole new world opened up, and it was like, fuck. Now I understand why all these old guys talk about the Floyd, and even though, which I didn't realize back in the day, it was not the Floyd the old guys were talking about, right? So I listened to Delicate Sound of Thunder, then move a few years, and I was able to go to the concert in '94 in the Division Bell tour, and that just won me over. The September 2nd of September show, which I taped partially myself, which I shared on Yishkel and all the other ones, which is crap, by the way. There's far better ones. And there I got a flyer from the Echoes fanzine, which Charles, one of your former guests, I think used to run. And that was, again, the next level. That's where all the bootlegs were described and all the shows were described. And it's like, damn, there's this whole different thing. It's not just the regular records, which I listened to and which was interesting, but it's like, And then there was a store in Antwerp where I used to live that sold bootlegs quite openly. I'm talking CDs back then. Record place was records, like who's interested in records in the 90s? Nobody, right? So I was buying a Clear View, the Chicago one, or Nothing Has Changed, the Modena one, or all that stuff. And then started getting into the 75 tour and the 77, and it took me I would say many years before I got into the earlier stuff. And I went all the way back to 69, 68 is the furthest I would go. Earlier just doesn't hit me. It's, I would say 72 to the latest stuff. And
so you were late at the party, but you jumped all in.
Yeah.
And then you took the pool in the end.
Exactly. And I started collecting feverishly, and then my goal was to get all the Division Bell shows, which I got in the end, minus, of course, the 2 or 3 ones that were supposedly never recorded or shared. And then the same next step was the Momentary Lapse of Reason tour. So I got all them, and that's when I saw, okay, there's more, and I started collecting the 77s, and the Wall never really did it for me, even though I got them all. But yeah, I'm a dry Floyd fan. Yeah.
Perfect.
Always been, always will be.
Perfect fit for discussion today. So how do we start? It's 1984. Roger Waters released his second solo album, The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, and he's touring with it together with Eric Clapton. Great tour. And David Gilmour just released About Face and did also, I would say, much smaller, but also tour. And everything seems like Pink Floyd are done, I would say. At least Roger Waters, I would say, thought that. But then, the coming years, David, Nick, and I think even Rick, even though he was legally, if I understand it correctly, hindered to be called a member of the band because he had some sort of contracts until then, decided to do a new Pink Floyd album. Much bigger, much better, whatever. So they went to the studios and they got together a big band and many contributors and composers, and they created a Momentary Lapse of Reason, which has been released in summer 87.
8th of September, right? 9th of September it was, right?
September, late, very late summer.
Because the first shows were without the record, right?
Oh yeah,
the Toronto shows were without the record being available. I think they only became available on the 13th of September or something like that. I could be wrong. Some YouTube comment.
Ottawa was on September 9th. And I think the album came out like I was trying to do the research on that. I think that the album came out like a day or two later. I was fortunate enough to see Roger here in Minneapolis on, I think it was the 10th of September, 10th or 11th, now I can't remember. And the album had just come out. I think the show was on a Thursday. Momentary had come out like on a Tuesday. And I remember listening to that and a lot of Rotters driving up from college to see Roger here. It was quite an exciting time, obviously.
Yeah, I remember I went to a local store here in Bonn, Kaufhaus, or Kaufhof it's called, and I bought the CD and I was totally excited. And I think the discussion will start now because I was utterly disappointed at the first time. I listened to it and I liked the first song, Signs of Life, but even learning to fly and everything, I was utterly disappointed because looking back now, it's totally understandable what had been changed, but the final cut was not really my album, but I have to admit, more it seems like it, more a Roger Waters guy, and to have this
No.
very 80s style, drummy, um, technical album without this Roger Waters part in it. I didn't like it at all, which changed later. But first of all, how did you, Adam? How do you remember listening to the A Momentary Lapse of Reason for the first time? Do you remember what you felt about it or what you thought about it?
Yeah, I think there was a tremendous amount of excitement. I mean, Roger Waters released Radio Waves first, and his Radio Chaos had come out first, and then Learning to Fly came out, and I think there was a tremendous amount of excitement. I think at the time we knew that they were going on tour. This album was coming out. Um, I sort of felt the same way. Like I love The Wall, but it's clearly that's a Roger album. I love the final cut, but it's a Roger album, right? I love Pros and Cons. Um, One of the things I think that it shares with the two previous ones is like a lot of really short songs, right? There's a lot of really short songs jammed into 45 minutes. So I think one of the first things that I realized with the Momentary Lapse of Reason is there's a lot less songs on it, right? So it started to have, I think, more of a Floydian quality, right? So you had this great intro, you've got a great ending song. You've got some songs that are sort of smushed together. You've got things, flowing really well, but you don't sort of have the story that Radio Chaos had. And so it seemed completely different and completely different. And in my mind, I think Niels, your perspective is really interesting because in my mind, all I did was compare Momentary to Radio Chaos, and they're just vastly different. I don't think at the time it really made sense to me how many people it took to put out an album. I mean, you're excited. I mean, you're looking and you see extra songwriters, whatever. Maybe Roger needed help, with something, or sorry, David needed help with something. Like it wasn't that big of a deal. I think once you then realize how much help he actually needed in the studio and how much help he needed writing songs, I think in retrospect, it's not as solid as it could be. But you do have to think about it as, what it was in the time and how music was changing, and how, alternative and, was emerging and new wave music was popular and the sound of the music and the production was different. And why wouldn't they try to do that? Why wouldn't they apply that to, something? So, Radio Chaos sounds completely modern in 80s. And Momentary Lapse of Reason sounds completely modern in 80s. And I just think it's a function of the time and it's kind of where things were. But I've realized over time that, that album doesn't resonate with me as much as I think. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, I end up listening to all the shows and there's better shows out there to listen to than, what they were performing.
So, Martin, as I understand, you met Pink Floyd even 2 years after the Momentary Lapse of Reason had been released. So it must be a whole different kind because you saw them live and then first listened to the albums. Is that correct?
No. Sorry. I got the Delicate Sound of Thunder album before I saw them live, right? So that was
Okay.
my intro. So it was all this smooth. It got the hits on it, right? You got One of These Days, Money, the whole shebang, and it's got the new stuff on it, and I liked it. I'm one of the few people on this earth that likes Dogs of War, apparently.
Mhm.
I always liked One Slip. I found it very interesting to hear that it's actually the alarm from the Astoria boat that is used in the beginning, right? I don't know where I read that. Yeah, the only bits I don't like on the Momentary Lapse of Reason are the three songs, Yet Another Movie. I can't be bothered to learn their
Uh,
names. The
Terminal
Round and
Frost.
around.
exactly. It's never did it
Yeah.
to me. It's not. There's other favorite artists of mine that have songs that I do not listen to at all. I will listen to them, but besides those three, I really love the Momentary Lapse of Reason album. You may say today that it sounds a bit dated, but so does Radio Chaos, right? I mean, it's 80s, and
Yeah.
we're 80s guys. Maybe I don't know about you, Adam,
Yeah.
if you're a 70s guy, but I think you're an 80s guy as well, right? Maybe
Yeah, I'm
an
an
early
80s.
80s, and
Yeah,
I'm a late
I mean,
80s.
I'm an 80s guy. Yeah, I mean, I think going back to what I said before, is I think you have to think about what things were like then. I just randomly came across a video on YouTube that talked about all these prog rock bands and how they, became new wave in the 80s, and, Rush playing with synths, and if you think about the change that happened to Genesis, and obviously the Trevor Horn production on 90125 is just amazing, but all those bands sounded completely different in the 70s. And so if you think about what Pink Floyd did then, and you think about what Roger did then, okay, it is what it is. I think that's why most people would think that the Division Bell is probably better, because they
We'll come to
stripped
that
back
later.
and stripped
I
back and
have
went
to
back,
interrupt you there.
went back to basics.
It was more Freudian, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. We come to as I said, we come to back to that later. Back on. It's one
Let me,
thing
sorry,
because you
Nils,
say, yeah,
let
Martin,
me add one more thing.
shoot.
Sorry. I've always been, you said earlier, you at least at that point in time, you were more of a Roger fan, right? I've always been more of a Gilmour fan, simply because he plays the guitar. I'm a guitar fan. I'm a big Knopfler fan as well. I love guitar, and he's just he's a genius on the guitar, and that's what I mean. Sorrow. Do I need to add
Yeah.
any more? I
Sorrow.
mean, it's,
No. I have a theory
so
about
that's what
Sorrow. We can probably talk about it later.
Yeah,
exactly.
the thing is that if we talk about the bootlegs and the recordings later on, it's the same thing there, and I've said it many times in the former episodes that my Pink Floyd career, so to speak, is totally dependent on what I felt at that time and very strong emotions. And with Atom Heart Mother in the beginning, Dark Side of the Moon, Animals, it's really connected to my childhood strongly. And that, I would say, is more on the Roger Waters side than David Gilmour. I always appreciated David Gilmour very much for his play, and he's a very, very, very good musician and everything. But these emotional things, if I listen to the final cut now, I strictly remember the time when I first listened to it. And I can listen to Momentary Lapse of Reason, and I like Momentary Lapse of Reason quite. I don't feel anything like that. That's the thing. But I want to come back to Dogs of War, Martin, because you say you like it, and I just want to read the lyrics.
See, but that's the thing.
Dogs
That's the
of
thing. Don't you
War.
don't.
No, you have to bear it. Dogs of war and men of hate. With no cause, we don't discriminate. Discovery is to be disowned. Our currency is flesh and bone. Hell, open
Brilliant.
up and put on sale. Gather round and haggle for hard cash. We will lie and deceive. Even our masters don't know the web we weave. I mean, you can say anything about Polly Sampson, but I wish he would have met her before. Because honestly, I mean, this is the poorest way of trying to recreate something like on animals. We have dogs, we have sheep, we have pigs, now we have wolves of war. No, not acceptable. Martin, you can say whatever you want,
Yeah,
it's
but
not acceptable.
again, it's the guitar. It's the guitar that makes the difference for me.
It
Yeah,
does make a
maybe.
big difference.
I've always
Yeah.
been more of a. I listen to the song, not specifically to the text. The text comes later, and by then I'm sold to the song because of the guitar part. That's how it worked with me, and that's Dogs of War will always be one of my favorite Momentary songs. Not my favorite Floyd song. Don't get me wrong, but I really like it.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the guitar solo there. I'll give you that. I mean, I think the rest of the music is very plodding. I think the lyrics are weak. The video is, embarrassing, with the dogs or the wolves running around, but it's got a great guitar solo.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are we gonna mention? Sorry,
yeah.
are we gonna mention on the turning away in this chat? Because if we're not, we should mention on the turning away. because I think that one is epic.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
That is the most Floydian song on that whole album, in my opinion. Oh, I
Yeah.
see doubts on
You
your.
might no.
Yeah.
No, I'm thinking you might be right. I personally like the combination of New Machine, Terminal Frost, New Machine. I know you don't, but I think that's all also very Floydian, and I like it. Maybe it's because there's no singing on it. I always liked instrumentals more than on every, not just Pink Floyd. Um, yeah, it is. I would say, and we talk about it now. I would say the world tour they did, and they played that album, and I was there at the same leg, at the another Lapse leg on 89 in Cologne. But as you mentioned, also mentioned before, Martin, one of my first bootlegs from that tour was the Nothing Has Changed, which was a very ugly but compelling bootleg, and the sound
Absolutely.
was great, I would say. And the other the other bootleg I got was A Clear View, which covers one of the first performances, Rosemont,
Chicago.
I think,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
Chicago it
Chicago.
was,
Horizon.
yes.
Yeah. Look for it now.
And listening to these really also got me into Momentary Lapse of Reason. So if we talk about the world tour now, I think it's very important to talk about the very big surprise they had for the first 12 shows, and the surprise is called Echoes. I say surprise because I would say it surprised all of us, the audience, but also a little bit the band, because it's a little bit of a mess most times. In the end, they got it quite right, but they forgot the lyrics. It was a mess. They
Yeah,
just,
it's a complete
it seemed
mess.
as they didn't rehearse it. I don't know why,
Yeah.
but it was totally upside down.
But they did. They did
still,
rehearse it, and it still didn't come together.
yeah.
Yeah.
But still, it's a very compelling moment from me still to listen to these very early shows having echoes on it, because it's, to me, it's the bridge between the old Pink Floyd and the real 70s and the new Pink Floyd, because it was, echoes is something special. So I'm very sad that they dropped it instead of trying harder. But
Yeah, there's a lot of I think there's a lot of context around it that's probably worth bringing up, and maybe it's just me. So the first CD I ever bought was metal. There was not a lot of kids in my school that had CD players at the time. This would have been spring 1985, and someone told me, if you see a disc, buy it. You may never see it again. So I go to buy my first disc, and I see metal, and I buy it. There's no barcode on it. It's a Japanese pressing. It's great. So that really got me into Echoes. When the classic rock station here would play the BBC 71 show, someone at school taped it, and I got that and start listening to it more. And when I got my car, I wanted to get my first car, this would have been summer 87, I wanted to put some sort of Pink Floyd license plate on it, and had a long discussion with a friend of mine, and put Echoes on it. This was August of 87, right? So we've got tickets to,
Awesome.
a friend and I have tickets to see Roger Waters I talked about previously, and we know Momentary is coming out, but we certainly don't know what the band is up to in Toronto. And I was actually talking to him the other day about this. I don't know how we found out about things back then. I mean, it feels, in my mind, it feels like all the stories about, the first nights of the tour and how things were evolving that September, whipped around. It must have taken months. Like, I don't know when I first found out that they played Echoes. I missed a chance to see them in Chicago on that leg of the tour. My friend did see that the Sunday night show, so he went like 2 days after the last Echoes. I had a friend in Philadelphia who saw the Echoes performance at JFK Stadium there. But it took a while, and it may not have even been until the Rolling Stone issue with them on the cover came out, and that was probably sometime in October. If you, I'm sure anyone's listening to this podcast, has read that article, but if you haven't, it's chock full of fascinating information. It talks a lot about the lawsuit. It talks about the first nights of the show. It talks about the Chaos 2 recordings, which I don't think ever really happened. But it was amazing to think that they went back and pulled Echoes out because they hadn't played it for such a long time. And obviously it felt very special to me. I do think that it was a disaster, and I could probably go on more and more about, what a disaster the performance was. And I listened to one of them this week, and it was really awful, right? Like, it's an embarrassment. So David clearly made things better in 2006, and I know we're not going to talk about that, but I do think that those performances are probably the best versions of Echoes out there. It's interesting to think that when they decided that wasn't working for them, that they pulled Shine On out, right? Like, maybe they just felt like they needed to do like a really long song and give people their money's worth if they, liked old stuff. I think it kind of worked a lot better based on the rest of the set list than Echoes, but it's I think for us it's probably fascinating to go back and listen to how poorly done those renditions are. But it was mind blowing at the time, and I know I loved it then, and now it's just humorous to listen to.
I want to add to what you said about the best versions of Echoes. I think the best version of Echo is the acoustic one at the Abbey Road Studios. I think that one is brilliant.
Yeah, that's lovely.
But that's totally besides the point. Just one question to you guys. Am I wrong in thinking that the first few shows they had Echoes to start with and then Shine On to end the show? Or am I
correct?
Yeah,
or at least a few of them, right?
So I think there's a couple different. There were a couple different set lists that September before they finally got rid of Echoes. I know the first night there was Echoes. I think they went to Cleveland, and I think they started with Echoes and threw Shine On there. I think there was a show where they started with Shine On and didn't do Echoes. I know by the time they got to Chicago, I think they weren't doing both. There's something about that, either Toronto or Cleveland, where they were doing. I think there's 2 or 3 recordings where they did both. And then they finally, settled into their groove, obviously.
Do you know why, or do you know what David, how he explained pulling Echoes?
In an interview, he was having problems singing about albatrosses.
Yes, exactly. That was the main reason.
Yeah. So why did he bring it back? That's the more fascinating question.
Because of Sid, I suppose, no?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So something else about this tour. I do not agree with many people saying that that they played like robots, and that it was too technical and always the same and everything. And I think that's really not true. And it's a little bit of the Pink Floyd or later year Pink Floyd haters saying that, because at least 87 it was very different and very vivid and everything. But there's one thing I would like to discuss with you, because I personally, and that's my personal thing, and I might be superficial, I really did not understand why they put guys like Scott Page, the saxophonist, and Gary Wallace, the extra percussionist, on the stage. And this by no means is related to the capabilities of these two musicians. They're both very capable, and if you listen to Scott Page, he's wonderful. And Gary Wallace, absolutely no point to discuss. But he created an atmosphere, Scott Page, first of all, I would say, on the stage, which was so un-Pink Floydish and so wrong to all the old, I would say, old Pink Floyd fans, because all these years, and this is my personal experience, I have to admit, all this year Pink Floyd was a little bit sad, a little bit angry, a little bit, on the back, but not on the front. And then there's this guy dancing around. Gabe Pratt did the same maybe, but not in that way. But he was like, with his hair and everything, it was just the opposite of what Pink Floyd was to me in my personal experience. And I don't really see any reason to have an extra percussionist being in a cage, jumping around and hitting extra percussions. There was just no reason. And this is something I'm really annoyed of. for this tour that they try to move and change Pink Floyd and the whole feeling about Pink Floyd into a new technical super band, which was, in my opinion, a wrong decision because the rest, like the laser show and everything they did, was great, 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 great. But I don't see why it had to look like a zoo on stage. Silence.
Yeah,
I
well,
was thinking, I thought Adam was going to say something.
polarizing, obviously. Um, so one thing that I hadn't thought of until just now on David's About Face tour, he had Raphael Ravenscroft playing saxophone. So obviously he feels like saxophone is something that he needs to have in the music. So bringing someone on tour with him probably made sense. And I don't think it was the whole tour, but he had Jody Linscott playing percussion as well. She had a solo in Blue Light. Um, Maybe he really liked percussion. I mean, honestly, I don't like the excuse that Nick didn't have confidence playing and they needed someone else to back him up because
That's what I was going to
I
say.
mean, it's pretty clear that Gary's not backing him up. He's just making extra noise on stage. Um, at the time, I mean, I love percussion. I think it's great. I had seen Gary play with the Power Station, same cage, doing his same thing. I think he's there to have sort of that 80s hip vibe. I have no excuse for Scott Page. I'm sure he's an extremely nice individual. I've read interviews with him. Um, but he wasn't the right type of saxophonist to go on tour with them. Not at all.
Nothing to add.
I feel a bit bad because it sounds like a rant every single time, and I have to say again, seeing them live in 1989, I was there by myself, being quite young, like 16. It was one of the most exciting things in the world to me, and it was so great, and I loved it a lot. But still, I think if we're discussing right now what might annoy the Roger Waters Pink Floyd fans or the older Pink Floyd fans so much about the later years and the new shows and everything, I think it could have been, maybe he didn't want to, but it could have been avoided by just a few different decisions David made. But he thought it must have been greater and greater and bigger, and there must have been many things on the stage, and it never was like that for Pink Floyd. Even with the Wall, it was not the band, it was the Wall being the
Right.
show. And there's one more thing, and now you can really, really kill me, because I might be totally wrong here, but I read another lyric to you. Keep your dirty feelings deep inside, and if you're taking your girlfriend out tonight, you better park the car well out of sight, because if they catch you in the back seat trying to pick her locks, they're gonna send you back to mother in a cargo box. It's Run Like Hell, we all know that. And the way they perform Run Like Hell on this tour, making fun out of it, being hilarious about it, grinning and smiling and laughing. And it's really discussed, because I might be totally wrong here. But that again, I don't get, because the Wall is a very difficult piece of art, and it's a very sad and very serious piece of art. And in my opinion, better not to perform it than to make it like a disco song, which was the whole idea in the beginning of having a
hmm
disco song with that kind of context, which was totally not disco. And they, in my opinion, they totally forgot about that and made it disco with flashy lights, and because it's a disco track,
hmm
and this separates them from their own work. And maybe if I'm totally angry about it, or not angry but provocative, that was the idea of David, uh, against Roger. But I don't get it.
So, um, how are things in Europe in terms of playing um, songs, Pink Floyd songs on the radio? Like, did you guys grow up hearing? It's not like there's a lot of Pink Floyd singles, especially before.
The usual.
But usual songs. So was Run Like Hell played on the radio when you guys were growing up?
Cannot
No,
remember.
not really.
So
Money,
big
Wish You Were
classic,
Here, maybe.
Money,
big
Another Brick in the
classic.
Wall,
Yeah,
Twin
no.
Mountains. That's
See,
it.
big classic rock hit here in the United States was Run Like Hell.
Oh, really?
So, oh yeah, yeah. So I certainly knew the song before I heard the album. Young Lost was played on the radio a lot, still to this day. I'm trying to think what else would have been played. They'd play, several songs around, Brick 2, and Comfortably Numb, obviously. But, Run Like Hell gets played on the radio, to this day. And so I think probably when the set list is created, thinking about touring in North America first, not knowing what they were going to do, put it on there. What are you going to do? You've already got lasers and stuff. Shine the laser lights. I mean, so I hear exactly what you're saying, Nils, right? Like there's a lot of content that probably doesn't hold up to time, but the song's a big hit here, and I think that's probably why it went into the set list.
Maybe I'm too pathetic about it. I mean, there's no reason. I understand that even if it's a sad song and it has sad lyrics and everything, it can be played in a good way with a good manner, but not in this context, in my opinion. But sorry, Martin, you wanted to say something.
No, I understand what you're trying to explain, but in my opinion, they were enjoying. I mean, look at the it's exactly the way you described it. They're having fun on stage, and it happens to be a let's call it a darker song that they're singing about, but they're just having so much fun. At least Guy and David being on stage, being successful, having beaten Roger. Let's not forget that. I mean, that all plays in your mind, and I would say that's the reason the fun part of it. It's I think it's, I mean, I'm not a musician, but I would think it's a great song to play. It's a fun song to play because it's so energetic, and as you said, the whole laser thing, and the thing is that how to call it, the light boxes that go. I would love that bit. I would rewind and fast forward. No, I never fast forward. I would rewind and watch it again. I mean, it's a joy, not the but I understand what you're saying, but that's my opinion. I love the song, by the way. And I love the 2015 version that David did with the sunglasses.
Yeah, the sunglasses are great.
Yeah, that's true. So talking about the whole tour, they started in September '87, and I would say Knebworth 1990 was the official end, so to speak, but '89. They did about 200 shows, which is unbelievable. I mean, Pink Floyd always toured a lot, but it's 200 shows. It's exciting. And my highlight of the show for sure is Welcome to the Machine. It's I love very much. Sorrow I love very much. One of These Days. '87 is great. To me personally, it's the best rendition of that song, the best live rendition. And I liked a lot the jam part for Money. The problem is I can't listen to Money anymore, so it's difficult. I have to fast forward in this case really to the jamming part. And my personal highlight is Venice '89, which is funny because it was so late.
Especially the Money version in it.
Yeah, it's the perfect Money version.
With the
it's
girls.
The perfect. Yes, absolutely. And Venice was great. I saw it live on Dreisat and German television, and it was. I saw Roger Waters 1 year later in 1990 live in Berlin. I was there, and the whole at
Lucky.
that time, the whole no, I wasn't lucky. I can tell you a little bit about that later, but it's no, I was not lucky. There was a lot of dust and not a lot of sound. So much I can say, because there were like 12 stacks of speakers, and 3 up to 4 were working. So we had to find a stack which was working, and I paid like 80 Deutschmark or something for the ticket, and my
40
brother
bucks.
who said, "Oh, yeah, okay," and my brother who said, "Yeah, I'm gonna go there, but I won't buy a ticket." I said, "Yeah." I met him. There were 300,000 people, and I met him at one of the working stacks, and everyone in the audience was yelling "louder, louder," which means louder, louder. And Roger thought that they would say "Roger, Roger," and he said, "Yeah," he was waving to the audience. But this is totally different. So, but it was exciting times. I mean, being at Pink Floyd '89 and then seeing Pink Floyd '89 Venice and then Roger Waters '90, it was wonderful days. So, what, in your opinion, are the most exciting? Because we did not talk about the recordings yet, but there were many, many very interesting recordings for this from this tour. And what would you, Adam, recommend to the listeners of this podcast to watch out for?
Oh, well, I mean, we talked a little bit before about echoes. I mean, I do like the first night of the show because, or first night of the tour because, you can tell that they're excited and, a little trepidatious on stage. I think that Echoes is a train wreck, so it's a good one. Martin's got Prism up there. I mentioned the JFK show before. There's
Awesome.
so that's available in Soundboard. I love the final Echoes on the 25th
True that.
of September in Chicago. That's great. There's a show. I think it's somewhere around the 10th or 11th in New Jersey. That's
Is
really
October,
good.
right?
Yes. And then I fast forward, like I kind of skip over some of I think I mentioned Atlanta once. The Atlanta shows are good just because I think the videos that came out from Atlanta are 1,000
Oh
times
yeah,
better
yeah.
than Delicate Sound of Thunder, hands
The
down,
Omni.
because I hated all the soft focus stuff and the Omni shows look great.
It's true.
But there's like I think I'm not exactly sure if it's the Thanksgiving Day show or not, but from LA, it's like the
LA,
25th
yeah,
or
yeah.
26th
Tongue tied
of
and twisted, I think.
September. Yes, I think that's probably like the best of that era. If you don't need echoes, if you need to go echoes, you got to go back to September. The thing, Martin, you had mentioned on and turning away. I think Atlanta and the LA shows. I love Richard's sort of improvised intro to that song. I think it's so much better than what came out on Delicate Sound of Thunder, and so much better than the studio version, just because he's just got this long rolling intro to the song, and I think Dave sings it better. I agree with you. It's a great song. I think it's sort of sounds like classic Floyd, but there's something about that late '87 versions that I think are just spectacular. Um, Going into the '88 shows, um, I don't go back to any of the shows from like Japan and Australia and stuff like that at
They're
all.
good
Like
though. They're good.
well,
The Melbourne, the master, the master tape. It's not the master tape. The how do you call it? The soundboard from
hmm
Melbourne is I can't remember if it's a great show though, but it sounds
yeah,
great.
yeah. I probably need to
Yeah,
go back to
sound is
listen to
great,
that.
but the performance is,
Can't
if you
remember.
call if you call it robotic, if you call it, you know, it might be one of these shows they're referring to.
And then in the spring, um, so my first time seeing Pink Floyd proper was in Cedar Falls, Iowa, on the 15th of May. And what was truly fascinating about going to that show, besides the fact that I got to see Pink Floyd for the first time, um, somewhere around halfway through the show, a friend of mine leans to me and goes, "There's your boy," and the guy next to me is videotaping the show,
Awesome.
which blew my mind away. And so I kind of, quieted down a little bit after that, and I walked out with him and started talking to him, telling him I was a fan and I was a trader and stuff like that. And he's like, "Well, what do you have to trade?" And I'm like, "Well, I got this tape from seeing U2 in Iowa City on videotape." I go, "But it's really dark." And he goes, "Well, I taped that." And I'm like, oops, well, I'm never going to get a tape now. And he goes, send me your tape because I want to see what it looks like after it's been, sort of traded around a few times. He goes, and send me some blanks and I'll, record the Pink Floyd show for you. I'm like, oh, this is great. So I send him everything and he redubs his U2 show for me. So it's straight off the master. And I've got then the Pink Floyd show, from his masters. And, obviously with memories like that, there's no other show that could compare to that. So, that's my favorite show. But even then, I go back and listen to the fall shows more than anything else. But I want to know what you guys think because
Are you talking about the fall shows 87 or the fall shows?
yeah, the fall show's 87. So I mean, I was lucky that the shows were popping up in the trading circles and the bootlegs, as the tour was going on. But I got the impression that, Martin, you got into it a little bit later, so you have a historical perspective that I don't have. And Nils, I don't know how quickly tapes got to Europe.
No, we had a few bootlegs, but not too many. And as I said, we had a clear view.
All the Italian pressings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but these were mostly European shows.
Yeah.
Italian or European shows. I know that Cologne got bootlegged later on, and I even got it, and it's quite okay. But that was like 10 years after or something. So what on your side, Martin? Which shows stand out?
So obviously, let's not forget the Lester Pearson hanger thingy, which was
Hanger rehearsals.
When I got my hands on that one, I was like, oh, that's what they do before they actually go on tour. I love that. Contrary to you guys, yes, they're a bit the Echoes versions of those first 12 or whatever shows. They're not the perfect versions, but just that ping, just that.
Yes.
That's enough.
Yeah, I get you. Oh, yeah.
That's enough. And then the seagulls. My favorite part is the pings in the beginning. And then when he starts doing after the seagull has done his thing, and then he starts doing the riffing again, it starts quietly. I don't care what the sound quality is like. I don't care if he sings the wrong line. That's what does it to me. That's the guitar, man. So those first few shows, and as I showed you earlier, the Prism box was one of the first of those tours that it was actually not that expensive when I bought it. I love that one, even though it's not perfect quality. There's better versions of that same show out there these days, which happens to a lot of the stuff that we got back in the day, right?
Yeah.
Then the Italian shows of '88, not just the Modena one, but also the Rome one is a good one. And Pink Elephants Flew Over whatever Torino.
Yeah.
Some of the German ones are good as well. If I remember the Berlin one, and then the
Gelsenkirchen. No, that was later.
No, that's later.
Gelsenkirchen 94.
The Berlin one, and then there's another one. Frankfurt is not bad either. Obviously, I've got my chauvinistic reasons of liking the '89 tour opener in Belgium. Also, that whole bit Verona and Lausanne in Switzerland, all those shows.
That's a good show.
That's my. I'm a Delicate Sound of Thunder baby. I mean, that's how I got into it. So yeah, I like a lot of them, and I like the bizarre ones are the Japanese ones because the audience is so
quiet. Yeah,
it's like the fuck. But it's interesting. I love it.
So
and then there's the Austrian. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to ask real quick. So having sort of like your first big experience be with Delicate Sound of Thunder, when the Calhoun tapes came out and you saw most of a show, but in vastly different visual quality, how did that change your view of Delicate Sound of Thunder?
It's like your first love. It doesn't. It's like, oh, there's better stuff out there, but it's my baby.
Okay.
I don't know. I assume it's the same for you with what did you mention in the beginning? Was it Radio Chaos? You're Radio Chaos fan, right? And a Final Cut fan as well, right?
Yeah.
That's your introduction into the Floyd world. Put it like that. It's always going to be some special. It's always going to have a special place in your heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally get that.
Thing. I know it's not the best. I know Delicate Sound of Thunder is, and I'm not too happy with everything of the remaster that they did last.
No.
Or two.
No.
some of it is good, some of it is really cringy. But the original one is what does it for me. The original.
It's good.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Live at Pompeii is one of these videos you're talking about with Delicate Sound of Thunder video, because it is the first time I saw them live. I remember that
I mean the original Pompeii one.
The original Pompeii.
Yeah.
The good Pompeii.
Much before. Now I remember that being at dinner with my father and a friend of my father, and the friend of my father told my father that there's a strange and weird Pink Floyd video out there where the band is preparing for a gig for the for the first half of the show, and then reconstructing or deconstructing for the second half, which was wrong, but this was his story about it, and it blew my mind. And then I went to the German video store, and after a while I found it, and I remember playing it on the VCR for the very first time.
Mm-hmm.
I was blown away. So I totally get you, Martin. It's this kind of experience and the connection to the moment where you experienced it that makes it valuable. Absolutely. So I think that wraps up a little bit the 87 thing, the 87 era, and then we fast forward to 1994, A Division Bell. Another studio album by Pink Floyd, and this time it's composed mainly by David Gilmour and Richard Wright, with just a very few external contributors. I think you can hear it immediately. It's much more Pink Floyd. It's much more. The German word is homogen. I don't know the English term for that.
Homogeneous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's as a studio album, I like it much, much more. The funny thing is, on a song-to-song basis, I like it less than A Momentary Lapse of Reason. There are a few highlights, like Marooned, like High Hopes.
Nope, never liked it. I know, I'm one of the few.
Yeah. You like Dogs of War, but not High Hope. That says a lot.
I also like Keep Talking a lot.
Oh, yeah.
It's a wonderful song and a studio song. To be honest, What Do You Want From Me does nothing for me. Poles Apart, Great Day for Freedom, even wearing the inside out. Take It Back, Coming Back to Life, just does nothing for me. But I listen to A Division Bell as a complete conceptual album, and this is
Cluster One. Let's not forget Cluster One.
Yeah,
I love Cluster One.
True, Cluster One is great. So, I think it's a much, I wouldn't say better, but it's a wonderful album at the time, and still is. I think it's still does not sound too outdated or old-fashioned or 90s-ish or whatever.
No.
It's wonderful.
It's more coherent.
Yes, absolutely. Coming to the world tour they did in 1994. Haters gonna hate. I think it's the boring version of the 87 tour.
How can you say that?
Yeah. Except for one key addition.
The Dark Side.
Astronomy Domine.
And the Dark Side. No?
I was much more surprised with Astronomy, right? Like, I always feel like there's Sid guilt, and maybe there was Sid guilt, like, you know what, let's get him some royalties, so we'll play it, we'll release it. But I remember they did like a big, broadcast thing the first night of the tour from Miami, and I was really surprised to hear that. Like, I never ever expected to hear that. And same thing, when you play it, on the solo tours. I went back and listened to some tapes this week, and Dark Side's fine. It was a surprise. I like the rumor of it. I like the fact that they decided to do something different and change it up a little bit, because I hate a set list that never changes. I like
Mm.
that's part of being a tape trader and someone that's interested in live performance. Like
Yeah.
I really should be a Grateful Dead fan. I can't stand the Grateful Dead,
Or
but
a
I read
Dylan
Grateful
fan.
Dead set lists or a Dylan fan. Like, but I'll read the set lists. Even new Dylan, stuff. I'll look at the set list to see what old weird stuff he's playing. So it was nice when Dark Side came in, but yeah, the tour felt like Momentary Light, but with one key addition.
Martin.
I remember, first of all, I had the tickets for the show. I was excited as hell. I don't know if I had the tickets before the tour started in the US. I cannot remember. But I remember having the bootleg of the Miami show pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah, it moved
different times.
fast.
Stuff popped up
Yeah.
quickly. And I was excited and disappointed at the same time because, first of all, quality wasn't that great. And the show itself was, the surprise of astronomy, absolutely. But it was not my favorite. It's definitely not my favorite boot of the tour.
Hmm.
I think on the Turning Away it got even better than on the
Hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
Momentary tour. I agree with your comment on one of these days that it got boring as compared to the Momentary tour. I again was happy to see that Run Like Hell stayed in the set list. There's some great boots. Pontiac Silverdome is a great one. Louisiana is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
San Antonio, I think, was great. Then there's a few great European ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I agree with you, Adam, on the set list thing. A bit more variety would have been nice. But I don't see it as a light tour. I see it as the next step in the band's
Yeah.
history.
I always think so. Let's go back to the album for a second because when Nils, when you're talking about the songs that were on it, the thing that I found disappointing when getting it, and after all the initial excitement, is Dave seemed to have a formula. Like, let's open up with something atmospheric. Let's have an instrumental. Let's have an epic final song. And then there's, a couple singles that'll get on the radio and there'll be some other things. And that's not to say that that's wrong, but it did follow a pattern
Sure.
from Momentary Lapse of Reason, which, think about it. I mean, there's 7 years between those albums, and he got married, and I can't remember if he had a child in that time frame or not, but he certainly picked up some stepchildren. You think that there'd be, a little bit more of an evolution. I mean, if you think about the difference, and this may be controversial, if you think about the difference from Radio Chaos to Amused to Death, I mean, there's no comparison.
No.
I mean, like, Roger Water put together, another masterpiece there. And I don't think this is a Dave versus Roger thing. It's just that Amused to Death is an amazing album. And he did something completely different than his two previous solo albums. And Dave didn't progress in the same way, at least from a holistic album perspective.
Yeah. I mean, we will invite you back, Adam, talking about Roger Waters' solo works because it will be most exciting. Yeah, me too. But yeah, I agree on that, and it's I think about any Pink Floyd album after Dark Side now, and I think if on Wish You Were Here or Animals, if Roger would have accepted to have a song in there, just to have a song in there. And that's something David did on the Division Bell, as you said. And that's also something I can barely accept for Pink Floyd to say, yeah, it's, it was different thing with Atom Heart Mother and even Metal because they concentrated so much on Atom Heart Mother that they had a filler for the B-side of the vinyl, and the same for Metal, and still they had One of These Days there. But they had a few songs which would say today, okay, you don't really need them. But after Dark Side, or starting with Dark Side, there was no song there on any Pink Floyd album just for the reason to fill up the playtime.
No, not at all. I mean, you can even think about what they chopped out of The Wall, and I prefer the longer versions of Empty Spaces, obviously, because it's a great song. But yeah, there's a lot of filler, and who knows what type of demands was on Roger from, coming from the record labels, because it was clear by the time you knew that they were, writing and recording the Division Bell that, it was Pink Floyd Incorporated, right? And it was David's company, and he was running it. And there was lot of pressure on him to do something. I mean, that tour was a big deal, right? I mean, I think when they went into the '87 tour, obviously, bringing lawyers around with you, they had no idea how long they were going to be able to tour for. Some judge could have stopped them. They maybe never got to, to Asia and Europe. I mean, that felt plausible at the time. In '94, Dave could have done anything he wanted to do. He could have toured that much longer, and he probably should have, right? Maybe would have gotten even more interesting. But just, I think it was corporate demands on him versus maybe artistic endeavor. And Nils, to your point, everything that was maybe done before the wall, I think was Roger and company putting art above all else. And that's probably the one thing that Roger has to this day, is he thinks about every last detail and tries to make it as much of a production, for good or for bad, than what David wants to do, which is probably just more about the music than anything else.
Yeah, yeah. So, but coming back to the tour in 1994 now, Astronomy Domini is a great opener, that's true. And the funny thing, I complained about the saxophonist, and I complained about having a circus on stage, and he removed all that. He brought back Dick Perry, and he did everything right, and he was at the peak of his capabilities, guitar-wise, the voice, everything was just perfect. But then he played What Do You Want From Me, Take It Back, A Great Day for Freedom, Poles Apart.
Which he didn't play too often. Poles Apart and Great Day for Freedom weren't played all the time, right?
But Take It Back. It's something like 7 to 8 minutes.
I cannot stand the song. It's the one song I think I even dislike it more than High Hopes. High Hopes, it misses the guitar for me. That's the explanation, by the way. I like the whole setting and the soundscape of it, but I miss the guitar, right? That's what I listen to Pink Floyd for.
Yeah.
But Take It Back is horrible.
I love High Hopes. So, but I think everything was settled for 1994 and everything was great, but the first set is just boring. Besides Astronomy Domini, maybe, and besides
On
Sorrow,
Turning Away, which is the last song of the first set, right?
Yeah. True. Yeah. Oh, yeah. True.
And then, can I interrupt you for a second,
Martin?
Phil?
Yeah.
Phil, Nils.
Yes.
Sorry. I did always like, even though you guys probably don't like Learning to Fly, I loved the visuals of it when the lights came up and he stands there, and the scene where he's waving. That's visually, that's something Roger like. The whole setting. The song, different story, but please go ahead. I interrupted you. Sorry.
No problem. Learning to Fly. I mean, to me, a difference between a proper song and a regular song is, if I would show you Learning to Fly now from Osaka, and if I would show it to you from Gelsenkirchen 1994, I don't think you would spot the difference.
No.
And that's not a good song then.
No. You're right.
So, and then they started putting Dark Side of the Moon for the second set, which was a great idea. And I would loved them to be brave enough just to release the Dark Side of the Moon live as an album and not P.U.L.S.E as it is. Because I think having at that time a double CD, and the first part is just, I would say, mediocre, and then having Dark Side of the Moon at the second, it just doesn't fit.
So why do you think they didn't? Do you think that was a Roger influence, or do you think it was trying to bury Roger? Like, why?
No,
I mean,
David,
CDs are popular. That was the format then. They clearly could have released the entire show on 2 CDs, but they didn't. So why is that?
David said in an interview that they had the idea of just putting out Dark Side of the Moon, But then they realized it's so great, all of it, we have to put it out, all of it. I think it was EMI at that time telling them that a double CD creates much more turnover and everything. But it's a total wrong decision, because I personally do not connect P.U.L.S.E with Dark Side of the Moon or a Dark Side of the Moon live album. It could have been done very much differently and could stand out as a very, very nice product. But it's just another live CD, and in comparison, Delicate Sound of Thunder to me does much, much more, because at that time, 88 or 89 it came out.
88.
It was
Late
Blast.
88, yeah.
Yeah, okay, it was Blast. And P.U.L.S.E is not a Blast.
Yeah.
P.U.L.S.E is a polished version
Absolutely.
of a polished tour with Dark Side of the Moon on it, which is nice, but not more.
Yeah. So it's interesting when after we were emailing last weekend, I said, okay, I gotta get my act together and get prepared. What am I gonna go listen to from '94? I said, well, I should listen to P.U.L.S.E. I should be fair to like what the original product is. And I look in iTunes, my iTunes, and I don't have P.U.L.S.E ripped. I got a whole bunch of other shows didn't have P.U.L.S.E. But I have Delicate Sound of Thunder in there, Martin. So, you got to think about, well, obviously I've got some sort of mental block. I think it's the only Pink Floyd album I actually don't have ripped in iTunes right now. So, I probably should go back and listen to it to see, how Dave and companies want me to think about that tour. But I get your point. I like I said before, I get your point that it was, Delicate Sound light. That makes a lot of sense.
It's like a pastel. Is it the same in English?
Pastel.
This pastel. It's like a pastel live album.
It's lighter. It's lighter, flowerier.
It misses the bite. I don't know.
Well, here I'll connect the dots. If you think about what the backup singers were wearing on that tour, they had white flowery dresses on, as opposed to Delicate Sound of Thunder. They were all
potato bags. They were wearing white potato
hats. Yes, exactly. And they're all wearing black tight catsuits in Delicate Sound of Thunder. There's the difference
with the gloves.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, and maybe in retrospective, it does make a difference if you're under tension, if you are at war with Roger Waters, if you don't know if you can play the show tonight. Maybe that creates some kind of tension, which always helped Pink Floyd to perform best. I mean, the tension they had within the band, the tension they had before. And in 1994, as you said, Adam, David could just do what he wanted and play as long as he wanted. There was no limitations, no tension, whatever. And maybe, as sad as it is, it takes something away, because it's too much polished and everything.
I think there's definitely an argument for that. It was exciting when On an Island came out and David decided to tour, or even go back to the Meltdown show, right? Like, I really think it was like a turning point in his artistry. Like, clearly for like the Meltdown show and the mini tour, a couple months later, he threw away his script. Like, he's like, here's how I want to present myself as an artist. Now he's doing that under the David Gilmour name and not the Pink Floyd name. But when he toured on his own in 2006 and then 12, 13, whatever it was, later than that.
15, 16.
Thank you. Vastly different approach to what songs he was going to play, how he was going to arrange them, who he had on tour with him, the care and thought about it. And it doesn't come off as Pink Floyd light, right? It comes off as David Gilmour, which is one of the reasons why I like About Face and that tour. But yeah, I think at the time he was probably just doing what was going to make people a lot of money. No pun intended.
But still, which shows would you say, Martin, stand out from the 1994 tour?
Before I forget,
you already mentioned Gelsenkirchen. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Oakland with the one single performance of One Slip. Even though it's not a great song, it was just bizarre,
it was different.
Fun fact. Yeah, it was different.
Gelsenkirchen, I would say, is a
I haven't
great
listened to it in
great show.
ages. I should though, right?
Yeah, listen to it. It's a great show, and it's a perfect sound for audio
Right.
recording. It's a wonderful
Which one was that?
It's a German football
Gelsenkirchen.
stadium.
Oh, the Shepherd. Yep.
Yeah,
The Rotterdam shows were great ones. The three shows in a row, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th of September. Softly Spoken Magic Spells is, I think, one of the bootlegs.
yeah,
Yeah.
I always like
Yep.
the show I went to, because that's where David broke his string during Conf Num, which is unique in yes, he did. And it was a great show, and I mean, loved it. The Earl's Court shows did not do much to me. They were too much. It connects me too much with, or reminds me too much of P.U.L.S.E, for obvious reasons. As I said earlier, the Pontiac Silverdome show I somehow remember as being a great show. The Louisiana, New Orleans one.
Yeah.
Sorry, is a great one.
Yeah.
Please, Adam, if you have other ones.
I don't. Yeah, I don't have a lot that
Yankee
really.
Stadium. Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, I don't. So that what's interesting is when I looked at the dates and looked at the shows that I have and I collect. I have a real gap for the European shows, which obviously I need to work on. So I think about the shows that were done in the U.S. and most of the ones that I have that I care about, honestly, were like some of those bootlegs, like the Live Bells and Softly Magic Spells. A couple other ones I can't think of. I remember San Diego being like a really good recording. I think there's video
Jurassic
of that
Parks,
as well.
right, or something.
Yes. I thought about the confusion of, was it really before the tour? Was it really a sound check? Now I can't think of the name of it. It's supposed to be a
I know
sound
what
check
you're talking
from
about.
Just Warming Up.
Tampa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Supposedly, we may not know. But the thing that, I know what you're saying about the Earl's Court show being too much like P.U.L.S.E. The thing that was fascinating at the time was there was, I think, the European broadcast of P.U.L.S.E, which I may have been live. There was the P.U.L.S.E pay-per-view, and then there was the album. They're all different, and then I don't know who did it, but someone put all the different P.U.L.S.Es together in a video. There's like 5 different versions that came out, and so there's like 4 different quadrants, and every now and then there's a 5th one that pops on, and you can see like the whole show, how it was filmed, and all the different angles and the way that it's been re-edited over time.
I'd love to see that, please.
Yeah, let me know. I'll get it to you. It's fascinating because you just realize, kind of like George Lucas, like there's a lot of revisionist history that goes on, and things change, and why? Like, what's the point? Like, why would they take time to go back and do it? But clearly, there's things that stick in their head about things to change. But I don't go back much. I think I'll have to go back to the European shows and get some tips from you guys.
Okay, so before we wrap things up, I would love to talk with you a little bit briefly about the Momentary Lapse of Reason remix that got released a few years back, and what you, Adam, make of it.
I was really excited when they announced it because I thought that was a bold move, especially considering they said that they were gonna, re-record, Nick's drum parts and bring different things out of the mix. I've listened to it, I don't know, 6, 10 times. I struggle at times. I think I wanted to hear different drum patterns, different drum sounds, and it's pretty faithful. And I think the other ways in which in which it was mixed, interesting, but I think I kind of went back to 30 some odd years later, like, I don't know if I need this. I'm not going to go find it in my collection separately. I know where Momentary is. I'll just go listen to that. So I think it's unique as something that they probably needed to do in that box set to help it, sell a little bit better, but it's not necessarily canon for me.
Yeah. And Martin, what do you think?
It's pretty similar. I mean, first of all, I'm not a guy that listens to the original albums much more than a few times, and then I listen to live stuff. Also, just before I forget, I always listen to live stuff. I've got so many videos, I've got terabytes full of videos, and I hardly ever watch it because the first time it's exciting, but then it gets boring. So yeah, I liked a few of the bits. I really disliked that they. Oh no, I'm confusing with Delicate Sound, where they cut out the bass solo in Money, right?
It's so good though.
I'm mixing up. I'm mixing up
that's
things.
Delicate
But
Sound.
there's other
That
stuff.
was
There's other
confusing.
stuff that they cut out, or they. It was interesting for briefly, and then as Adam said, move back to the original one. And if I ever listen to it, I listen to the original one and don't listen to the.
I'm gonna need to go back and listen to Delicate Sound of Thunder, the remixed one, because I'm sure I listened to it once. I don't know if I've gone back to it another time, but based on your love for the album, I'll have to go back and listen to it with a more critical ear. But my thoughts of that tour are spoiled by all the tapes and bootlegs. I may not notice what's missing from that disc.
To me, the remix version of the Momentary Lapse of Reason is like a almost totally new album, and I have to admit I like it a lot. I like I don't really realize the redrumming. Of course, it's not 80s like and everything, but it's quite close to the original.
Yes.
Not the sound, but the way. But I like Sorrow, the bass guitar. If you listen on headphones, just do it tonight. Listen to Sorrow, and just the bass line is so wonderful. And to me, it's a total fresh new album and not comparable to the old one, original one. The original A Momentary Lapse of Reason, I only listen for historical reasons sometimes, just to be reminded. But the new version, I personally put on headphones.
I'll check it again
sometimes.
Yeah, I got to do that too.
On headphones, the bass line is great, and I like it much more. I think it's a nice addition, and I'm happy to have it. And I think there's no reason to say that it's unnecessary or anything. So,
can we go back to Sorrow for a second?
Yes, sure.
Always.
Whether this stays in or not, because I don't know if we talked about it, Nils, beforehand. But a couple weeks ago, I was listening to something, and I was enthralled by Sorrow as usual, because I think it's an amazing song. And I went and I looked at the songwriting credits for basically the post about Face material. There are not a lot of songs that Dave wrote all by himself. But he wrote Sorrow by himself. And I'm starting to form an opinion that that's as good as he's going to get. And that's a really high bar. It's just, it's amazing. I mean, we could probably spend years debating what Roger Waters' song is best, but when it comes to what song Dave wrote, as an individual, I don't know if you can get better than Sorrow.
But it's a funny thing you say, Adam, because you could also say he's much better than he thinks he are.
Exactly.
He is,
I agree.
sorry.
Definitely.
He's actually able to.
Yes. And there's a funny thing, when I interviewed John Edgerton for this podcast, he told me the story that he spoke with David for 2, 3, 4 hours, and it was wonderful. And in the end, David felt very insecure and asked him if he articulated good enough, if it was okay, if he could understand him. He was so insecure about his articulation. I don't know if Roger Waters took it all from him, this self-confidence, but I think, yes, I totally agree that David Gilmour is totally capable of composing, and maybe he just did not feel the strength in him to do it.
I saw something recently where, and maybe it was just clickbait, but it's like, what song does David Gilmour, not wish he wrote or sang on, whatever? And it was The Narrow Way. And The Narrow Way is brilliant. And the very, very few rare recordings of The Narrow Way, like, his solo is majestic in there. I I really think it's one of the highlights of his career. And to think that he doesn't like it, maybe he doesn't like the lyrics. Okay, it was the 60s. There's a lot of embarrassing things that went on in the 60s for sure. But I don't know how you could be upset with, the music that's there. He is probably a little too hard on himself.
Also think it's
Yeah.
clickbait. I think it's the
That
what are
could
they
be it
called?
too.
Far Out magazine or something?
Yeah,
They
I
always
don't
pop
read.
up in
Yeah,
my Google alerts. I hate them.
yeah.
There's always stuff like that. Can I surprise you
So,
with one thing, Niels?
yes, Martin, do.
Do you want to know what my favorite Floyd album is? You can both of you can
Um,
take a guess. You're never gonna guess it.
Feared by Clouds.
no, The Endless River.
That would be a second. How would you? Okay, yeah,
I
you
just
got
went.
it.
I just went for crazy.
I
There's
love
a
it. I
lot
love
to.
it. I
There's a
love
lot to
Stuart by
like.
Klaus.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. Nils, you've got your theory about conflict, and when they do conflict, there's probably also pressure. I mean, if you think about how quickly they recorded that album, it
Yeah.
shows that they can bang stuff out when they want to bang stuff out. I mean, they worked on Dark Side before and after, and in the middle, there is this brilliant album with some
Oh,
incredible songs on it. The only thing that I liked about Roger's version of Dark Side was including the free four lyrics at the beginning, because as offended as I was in like the first 10-15 seconds of hearing it, by the end of the track I went, that makes a lot of sense in context. Like he
Yeah.
kind of pulled it all together there. So yeah, that's a great album, Martin.
but let's not talk about Redux now, right?
No,
No, no, no, no, no,
that's going to
no.
be a different
We wrap
show.
it up for today. We wrap it. So, what are your final thoughts about the era? How did you call it, Martin? The Pink Floyd
The Dry
era?
Floyd. It's something
The
from
Dry
Nashville. It
Floyd,
used to be called Dry Floyd back then. Yeah,
which is great because it's waterless.
exactly.
So, what are your final thoughts, Martin, about this
My
era?
final thoughts, for me, as I mentioned earlier, it's the period that got me into the Floyd. So it's always going to have a special place in my heart. I've searched for everything there was to get, and I think I got most of it. And it was a starting point as well. Let's put it fairly. It was a starting point for me to get into the older stuff as well. But I had to go through that stuff first before I could move on to The Wall and then just Animals, and then. So yeah, I love it. It's plain and simple.
Adam?
Yeah, it may sound like I don't agree, but I do. I mean, I think it was a tremendous thing to live through and have the excitement of, album, tour, concert, official concert recording, unofficial concert recordings, and, go through all that hype and excitement. And I still love the music. I think it's great. I think, like most things, you look back on those things with rose-colored glasses, and I've been trying to think about the historical context for what was going on in my life and in the world, and music at the time, and it was a lot of fun. Um, clearly it worked for Dave and the rest of the band, and tours that were seen by millions, and probably helped cement them and their legacy more than anything else. Otherwise, I don't think people would remember the final cut, and it would have been, the Dark Side Wall Band. That's what people would remember. And I think there's probably millions of people now that have, oh yeah, and there's this other stuff too. So enjoyable, definitely.
Yeah, my final thoughts are always haters gonna hate, yes, but if there's anybody listening to the last hour we talked about the later Pink Floyd era, I hope there's at least one or two who just give it another try and
Hmm.
spin the later works, because there's a lot in there live as well as on the studio albums. And I know that it's difficult for some Pink Floyd fans to accept that Pink Floyd was creative and great after Roger Waters left, but they were. And
Hmm.
I think the three of us here experienced them live, and seeing them live was the only possibility we had without Roger Waters, not being old enough to have seen the Wall shows in 1881. And I really hope that this little episode here creates a little bit of excitement, or at
Interest.
least last interest to listen to these again. And
Yeah.
with that, saying that, thank you very much, Adam. Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you, Niels.
It was a great
Yeah.
discussion.
Thank you,
And
Niels, very much.
great. Thank you. And thank you all the listeners for listening. It was very interesting for me. I hope it was interesting for you. And please do not forget to subscribe to the Fingal Cave podcast, not to miss any upcoming episodes. So have a good night or a good day. Goodbye.
That's it from us.